You know that moment when everyone in the room is subtly adjusting themselves, changing how they speak, what they say, even how they laugh, just to fit in. And then there is that one person who doesn't. They are not louder, they are not trying to stand out, but somehow they are the most noticeable person there because they are not being controlled. And that makes people uncomfortable. Not because it is wrong, just because it is rare. In a world where most people are constantly reacting, these individuals are choosing. And that difference changes everything. Let's start with something simple. Most people think they are in control of their lives. But if you look closer, you will notice something strange. They say yes when they want to say no. They stay quiet when they have something to say. They follow paths they did not choose, just to avoid disappointing somebody else. That's not control, that is conditioning. From a young age, we are taught to seek approval from parents, from teachers, friends, society, and over time, that need becomes automatic. You don't even question it, you just feel it. That subtle pressure to fit in, to not rock the boat, to be liked. But people who don't let others control them, they broke that pattern. Not because they don't care about people, but because they care about something more, their autonomy. Their decisions don't come from fear of judgment. They come from alignment. And that's a completely different way of living. Here is where it gets interesting. Psychologically, most control does not look like control. It looks like suggestion, expectation, social pressure. No one is forcing you, but somehow you still feel like you have no choice. That's the system most people live in. Invisible, but incredibly powerful. But those who resist it see it for what it is. They pause, they question, they ask themselves, is this what I actually want? And that pause alone is enough to break the cycle, because control only works when it goes unnoticed. Now let's talk about something deeper. Why do people try to control others in the first place? It is not always malicious. Sometimes it is the insecurity. When someone isn't fully confident in their own choices, they feel threatened by people who are. So they project, they judge, they try to pull others back into familiar patterns. Because certainty in somebody else highlights their uncertainty. People who can't be controlled trigger that reaction constantly. They don't follow unspoken rules, they don't chase validation, they don't explain themselves more than necessary. And that makes others feel like they are losing the influence. So what happens? They push harder. Subtle comments, guilt, disapproval. But here is the difference. People who don't let others control them recognize these tactics, not emotionally, logically. They see guilt for what it is. They see pressure for what it is. And instead of reacting, they stay grounded. That's their real power. Not rebellion, no defiance, just clarity. They understand something most people miss. You can respect someone without obeying them. You can care about somebody without surrendering your choices. And once you realize that, control starts to lose its grip. Now let's be honest. This kind of independence comes at a great cost. People won't always like you. You won't always be understood. Some relationships will change. Some will disappear completely. Because control often disguises itself as connection. And when you remove it, you see what was real and what wasn't. That's not easy. But it is honest. And people who live this way value truth over comfort. They would rather be alone and authentic than accepted and controlled. There is also something else happening here. Decision making. Most people hesitate. They overthink. They second guess themselves. Not because they are incapable, but because they have outsourced their authority. They are waiting for approval, permission, confirmation. But people who don't let others control them, they trust themselves, not blindly, but consistently. They make decisions, own them, and adjust if needed. They don't need consensus to move forward. So over time, doing all this creates momentum. That momentum turns into confidence, not the loud kind, just the quiet kind. The kind that does not need validation because it is built on experience. Here is another thing you will notice. They are less reactive. When someone criticizes them, they don't immediately shrink. When someone disagrees, they don't panic because their sense of self isn't fragile. It is internal. They don't rely on others to define who they are. So external opinions don't shake them the way it shakes the other people. That doesn't mean they ignore feedback. It means they filter it. They ask, is this useful? Not, is this approved? This shift alone changes how you move through the world. And then there is boundaries. This is where most people struggle. They know something feels wrong, but they don't act on it. They tolerate it, they adjust it, they compromise too much. People who don't let others control them, they set boundaries early, clearly, and without apology. Not aggressively, just firmly. Because they understand, because every time you say yes to something you don't want, you are teaching people how to treat you. And once that pattern is set, it's hard to break. So they don't let it start. Now here is the part most people won't admit. Deep down, a lot of people admire this, even if they don't say it, even if they criticize it, because there is something freeing about this. It is freeing to watch someone live on their own terms. It reminds you that this is possible, that you don't have to follow every expectation, that you can choose differently. But it also forces a question. If they can do it, why can't I? And that question is uncomfortable. So instead of confronting it, people dismiss it. They call it arrogance, stubbornness, selfishness, but it is not. It is just ownership. And ownership is rare because it requires responsibility. You can't blame others for your choices if you are the one making them. That's the trade-off. Freedom in exchange for accountability. And not everyone is ready for that. But those who are, they live differently. They move differently. They think differently because they are not being pulled in 100 directions at once. They are focused, intentional, present. And in a world where influence is constant, that kind of self-direction is powerful. So if you are someone who doesn't easily bend to pressure, who questions things instead of blindly following them, who makes decisions based on alignment, not approval, just know this. You are not difficult. You are not disconnected. You are not too much. You have just realized something most people are still learning. Control is only powerful when you give it away and you stopped doing it. And in today's world, that might be one of the strongest things a person can do.